Welcome to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and this podcast is your guide to start creating a lifestyle by design. From entrepreneurship, money and finance, tax optimization and residencies, and everything in between, this show highlights the nuances of a true global citizen lifestyle. Let's dive in. There are constantly new news and updates to various different programs and procedures in the investment migration space. So today we're going to be diving into some of these recent changes, some new recent policies that countries are looking to enact that may be beneficial if you're looking to obtain an additional residency or citizenship, and some of the changes that have been in the news lately and our take on them here at Work, Wealth, and Travel. So the first update, which you have likely heard in every news source, is regarding the US 2024 election. Now, Trump is seeking to, or proposedly seeking to, end double taxation for Americans. And I find this quite interesting that Trump, of all people, is coming out with this specific policy. The way that I see it is truly in order to gain votes, and there's going to be little to likely no follow through if and when Trump were to get voted in the US. I was talking to a friend about this the other day, and the interesting juxtaposition between this new policy, which again, I think is truly just a vote grab at the end of the day. There has been no additional documentation or policy written around what this would look like in practice. The last time Trump was in power, he was the one that enacted the GILTI tax, which actually did mean that Americans, if they moved abroad, if they were looking to optimize their tax, pay 0% tax in Latin America, or pay 9% corporate tax somewhere like Dubai, they are still required to pay a total of 10.5% through GILTI tax. So they have to make up the difference in order to equal 10.5% in taxation. So of course, on the personal level, Americans are always filing and likely paying back into the US, but on the corporate level, it was no longer possible to pay 0% anymore through GILTI tax. There are a few stipulations depending on the owners of the businesses, but overall, it has become much more difficult, and that was due to Trump. Now, again, there is no supporting documentation or policy that is currently written prior to the election in order to support what this would look like down the line if Trump were to be voted in. So again, everything that you see here on the news, even out of politicians' mouths, is not always something that you take at face value, really something that you have to critically think about. Of course, on this channel, we are all about critically thinking and planning a lifestyle based on your lifestyle design, what you are truly wanting, instead of simply going along with the flow of what others are saying. And this is a great example of that. So next up, we have some island updates. Now, first up is in the Solomon Islands. The government first revealed back in 2020 that they were potentially looking into a citizenship by investment program via the Citizenship by Investment Bill. So no details have been released about what the potential for this new CBI program could look like, of course, because this bill has not yet been passed. However, this is an interesting opportunity for yet another island country in the Caribbean to potentially bring decent revenue into the country through a citizenship by investment program. It is important to note that the Solomon Islands passport currently ranks 37th globally, and it has visa-free access to 134 destinations around the globe, including the Schengen area and the UK. So this is a fairly strong passport, again, depending on what your current passport portfolio looks like. And it has been discussed as well that if this new citizenship by investment were to come into play, the program offering would likely be competitive to what the other 5 Caribbean islands are currently offering. Of course, they have signed the documentation that the lowest investment amount is going to be starting at $200,000, and this would also be beneficial for the Solomon Islands if they were wanting to keep access to the Schengen area. So this is something that we have our eyes on, and we are seeing how this is going to develop, and of course, what the time frame is. These programs are always talked about, but in implementation and practice, they take much longer if they are ever even rolled out. So this is something that we are keeping our eyes on. So next up, we have an update from a few months back. Vanuatu, one of the countries that has famously had a citizenship by investment program, and infamously in the last few years has been under much more scrutiny, especially from bodies like the EU. Now Vanuatu is requiring an in-person visit in order to obtain the citizenship. So yes, while this is still a very interesting CBI program, it's not only going to be a paper application as it was in the past. You are going to need to visit the island at least once. And this reason is twofold. So the first reason is that you will need to, when you are physically present on the island, register your biometric data and facial recognition. So this is really to appease bodies such as the EU. However, they are saying that this will benefit the country in various different ways. And of course, this government decision came only a few months after the EU Commission proposed to make the suspension of Vanuatu's visa-free Schengen access. So yes, these measures are put in place to, again, appease certain bodies such as the EU Commission. And we also saw this similar a few months back in the price increase in the citizenship by investment programs in the Caribbean. Now, another interesting reason that was noted as to wanting to have a physical presence component to the application process for CBI in Vanuatu was that they believe that if the applicant spends time in the country, if they're physically present in the country, which again is not easy to get to depending on where you are located, but most countries in the world do not have direct flights to Vanuatu, so it is going to be somewhat of a treacherous journey in order to actually get to the country, then these applicants will associate more with the country, and that will to help promote the much needed tourism in the country of Vanuatu. So while this is an interesting update, it comes by absolutely no shock to the team at Work, Wealth, and Travel. In the last year alone, but really in the last 2 to 3 years, we have seen many residency, citizenship, and even bank applications take much longer and become a more rigorous process than they have been in the past. So this is a great example of if you are interested in any program, whether it be residency, citizenship, company formation, offshore banking, now is the time to get in because, and we always say this, but it is very true. It's not fear mongering. It's just the reality of the investment migration industry. Governments around the globe are paying attention to what other countries are doing, how they are becoming more difficult, and how certain bodies, again, like the EU Commission, really have power over a lot of these programs. So if you are interested in any offshore options, diversification options, or investment migration options, now is the time because they are always changing and they are always becoming more and more difficult. So reach out to us below if you're interested, and let's dive into the next piece of news. So next up, we're moving over to Latin America. Now we're looking at Panama specific for this piece of positive news, which is quite rare in this space. Usually programs become more difficult, more rigorous in order to apply, in order to get approved, and the pricing increases. However, Panama's investor visa, their golden visa, was set to increase from 300,000 USD to 500,000 US dollars. I've talked about this in a previous video. You can head back over to the channel and watch that because there are various different options, not only real estate, in order to obtain access to the global visa in Panama. And it was set to raise to $500,000 from 300,000 in the end of 2024. Now, the government has changed this. This is only assessed for 2 years. So in 2 years' time, they are going to reassess this. And quite honestly, they will likely increase the pricing of the golden visa at that point. But for the next 2 years, it is staying at 300,000. Through real estate, through various different options, head to the channel to check out that video. And through that, you can, within a few weeks' time, obtain the golden visa in Panama and get immediate access to residency, permanent residency, not temporary. You go immediate to permanent with this option in Panama. Now, Panama is an interesting option for a lot of our clients because it is a very friendly place for foreigners and for those who are both residents and non-residents. It has one of the best, if not the best, banking infrastructure within Latin America. There's going to be no better, not only banking structure, but also for crypto and for moving your investments into the country, the territorial tax system. So you have investments there. You can also benefit depending on how you're structured in a country like Panama. So if you're interested in learning more about how Panama could look for you, feel free to book a call below. Now, our last piece of news we have previously touched on, and again, this is going back to all programs are just becoming more difficult. So the Paraguay residency is again another territorial tax jurisdiction within Latin America. not so great for bringing investments, bringing banking into the country. Having access to your funds can be quite difficult. We do help many of our clients with this because it is a long process, not the best jurisdiction in terms of money and investments, but in terms of residency diversification, a very interesting option. But the process has become more difficult. So previously in the past, you were required to visit the country once, and with that, you would have your residency and your cedula process. Now the residency takes one trip, and then on your second trip, you will be required to come back to the country within your first 2 years, and then your cedula will be processed. If you are looking to have the tax ID in Paraguay, then you can only have the tax ID once you have the cedula. So once you have the second trip, once the cedula is processed, which takes a few months' time on average, at that point, you will then be able to have the tax ID. It's no longer a one-trip process. The good news in this is that there is no longer a time requirement for temporary residency. So no longer do you have to be in Paraguay minimum 1 day year 1, minimum 1 day year 2, and then transition over to PR. There's no longer a time requirement, but in order to simply get the cedula and tax ID, you are going to be required to come back and to have a valid police background check as well. So that's an additional component to the process. If you are interested in any diversification options globally, whether it be investment migration, investment in new markets, crypto investments, offshore banking, residencies, or citizenship, reach out to us below. You can book a call with us, and we're happy to share what these details based on your specific situation may look like. You've just listened to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. If anything from this episode resonated with you, I'd appreciate if you share this podcast on your socials. And of course, be sure to tag us at Work, Wealth, and Travel. And don't forget to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining us on this global citizen journey, and we'll see you in the next episode.